Hi, in this lesson we're going to try to use the subsurface scatter as our base material and then build on top of that. If you open scene 12 begin, you'll see I have a kind of bowl with some kind of liquid coming out of it. We're not really going to worry about the bowl, it already has a really basic material. We're going to worry about this liquid. So let's just take a quick render and see what it looks like. I have already selected a region so we don't worry about our ground shape. So you'll notice this is just some ceramic. I just wanted to add some color so we could have some interactions for reflections and things like that. And then we have no shader attached to this liquid. So I'm going to go ahead, open my Hypershade. Let me resize this. There we go. I'm going to make this smaller. And the first thing I'm going to create, it's a blend material. And we're going to try to create some kind of like hot cocoa or like melted chocolate. So I'm going to call this chocolate mix or chocolate blend. And with that blend material, now we're going to start with our base material, which instead of using refraction like we did with the ice cube, we're going to use a subsurface scattering or a very fast SS2. So this we're going to call chalk blend. And we're not really going to work with any of the presets. We're going to build this shader from the start. So the first thing I want to do is I'm not really going to touch any of these parameters just yet. I'll explain some of them later, but I'm just going to go ahead and change the overall color, which is like a filter color for this material. So I want to give it some kind of like chocolate, like chocolatey or like dark brown color. So with this open, I'm gonna give it like a slight red tint or like orangey tint, maybe something like that. I'm gonna give it a little bit of saturation, not too much, and I'm gonna bring this down, maybe like that. Okay, that seems like a good dark brown color, like very chocolate-like. And now let's re-render and see what happens. Again, it would be a good idea if I connect all of this. So I'll connect this to my base material and I'll connect my blend to my, let me bring this, I'm going to connect this to my shape. Okay, now we should get some results. I'm going to make this region smaller just so it renders faster. Okay, so now it has a good color. As you notice with SSS, you'll get a pre-pass before we render and it's calculating some of that scattering. So this color is good. Let's continue working. We're not really going to use the diffuse. The diffuse is when you want to have some areas where there's no scattering, but actually we will do that as a different layer. We will control the diffuse or the non-scattering shader as a different layer in our blend material. So with this setup, I'm actually going to use the same overall color as my subsurface color. So if you open here, it should be one of the last colors you created. There we go. Let's re-render and see what happens. And as you notice now, it's a lot darker because the light inside the shader, it's scattering in this color. This is like our filter color, and this is the color of the inside. Now, the scattering, like the actual color that it starts tinting as it's going through, it's going to be our scatter color. But before we do anything, I want to change my options to make this a refractive material. These are the kind of algorithms that are going to be used. For these kind of liquids, we want to use a refractive material. So just with this change, let's re-render and see what happens. And you're going to notice this is going to start looking like an almost normal material with refractiveness. But what's changing, what's going to be different, we're going to notice it here on top. As that shader gets thicker, it takes the subsurface color. So we want to control this. There's many ways we can control, like when it's refractive and when it's taking this darker color. One of those ways is by controlling the radius, and the other ways is by controlling the scatter color. The lighter we make this, the less of that effect we're going to have. And the darker we make this, the more we're going to see some subsurface and some refractiveness. So light colors will make the shader very refractive. Darker colors will make it more SSS-like. So with this cancel, I'm going to pick darker color, actually maybe something darker than what I had. Let me double click. There we go. Something darker than what we had for the other colors. I'm going to give it a slight red tint, a little bit different than the other one we had. We're going to give it some saturation. And we're going to bring this down a lot. Don't be fooled by what this swatch is giving you. Always test render, because this swatch for SSS materials can be extremely inaccurate. So don't pay attention to the swatch. Always pay attention to your renders, because it's going to change based on your topology, on the thickness of your models, on a lot of things on your lighting. So don't worry about this color. Let's try that out and see what we see. So you can notice we're getting a less refractive material. We have a lot more of that SSS, but we still have some transparency or transmitting here. So I like the overall color. I just want it to be a little bit less refractive, or just only on the edges. The other way we can control that is by controlling our scatter radius, which is measured in whatever units. Like V-Ray will assume they're centimeters, but it's measuring whatever units your Maya file is. So let's bring this down to 1 and re-render just to see what's going on. And this is looking a lot better. I know we have a lot of noise. We'll take care of the noise later, but we have a lot of this subsurface scattering going on here, but then we also have some refractiveness on the edges. And this is exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for some kind of liquid that on very thin parts it looks liquid, but then on thick parts it looks more like a wax or something like that. So let's clean this noise a little bit. Oh, the other thing I want to do in the meanwhile is just kill my specular. We will control the specular later. We will also add some specular layers. But in the meanwhile, I just want to pay attention to my subsurface scattering. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this number up. I don't know. Let's say what happens if we bring it to 64. See if that cleans it up a little bit. So that actually cleans it up a lot, and it didn't slow the render that much. We're still using the same settings that we had been using on the other ones, which are actually kind of low settings, and we are not letting the DMC sampler take over all of the sampling. We're actually controlling the individual shader or light samples. It's a very smart way when you don't have a lot of shaders. When you have dozens and dozens of shaders, maybe instead of having to modify every single shader, it's better to go and control everything from the sampler. But in this case that we're only going to have 3 shaders, I mean our checkboard, our ceramic, and our SSS, I really want to put a lot of samples in my SSS shader, but I don't really care about the other 2. So we're going to control everything from these subdivision parameters. So you notice here, this is looking a lot better. Maybe we could even bring this down a tiny bit, this refractiveness. Maybe if we use 0.9 and see what the difference is. The lower this number is, the less we're going to see this refractive effect, and the more we're going to get light trapped inside our object. And that's kind of what we're looking for in a subsurface scattering. So that looks a little bit better. We could even bring it just a tiny bit more. All these changes, as with everything in shading, are going to be very subtle, but you want to have a tiny bit of that subtle effect. So let's re-render this, see how it's looking. Okay, that's good. Maybe it's, I probably could use a little bit more. We're going to be layering some shaders on top of it, so I don't want to lose that much of that effect. Let's re-render, see how it's looking. And I think we're good. I mean, again, since we're going to be layering some other shaders on top of it, we will lose a tiny bit of this effect, but I think that's a really good effect. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go ahead and add some speculars just on top of it. Maybe something very subtle, like half the amount, not a complete amount, but 0.5, and something very rough, maybe 0.58 or 0.575. Re-render, see how that looks. And we have this very rough specular here. I actually really like the way it is. Maybe we could bring it down a tiny bit, but that's working very well. So I'm going to stop here, and on the next video, we're going to continue working on this shader, adding more layers, tweaking a little bit more controls until we get this final refractive SSS material. I will just save this as 13 begin, and we'll continue on the next video.